eisiau dim hapusach na byd yr aderyn bach. Byd o hedfan a chanu a hwylio toc I gael tŷ. Beth sy'n dod nesaf? Fatha na dyna fideo. Da ni'n cystadlu pnawn yma efo yr adar bach sydd yn hedfan a chanu a gobeithio fydden nhw'n hwylio toc I gael tŷ. Mae'n hyfryd iawn bod yma yn y gerddi Botanic. Dyma'r tro cyntaf I fi fod yma. Cwylydd gyda fi ddeud. Ond mae'n achlysur arbennig a dwi'n falch iawn bod weithiau bod angen I ni ofyn I bobl o ymhell bell I ffwrdd I ddod ato ni I ni fedru gwerthfawrogi yr hyn sydd reit ar yn stepan drws ni neu reit ar yn milltir sgwar ni o flaen yn trwyna ni. Felly dwi'n ddiolchgar iawn bod hyn yn achlysur I ni fedru wneud hynny. I'm Elin Haf Griffith-Jones and I'm here for the very first time in these gardens and I work with Alexandra Buchler here at Literature Across Frontiers and Wales Literature Exchange, two initiatives that bring Wales and the world together. And this is something that we want to do this afternoon as well. We're bringing Quebec and Carmarthen together, and we're bringing two writers together as part of a Wales-Quebec exchange programme that's funded by Welsh Government here and the Quebec Government there. And Christian and Fflur have already met each other over in Quebec, in Montreal, at the at the Metropolis Bleu Festival just a few weeks ago. And then they are reunited here in the Botanic Gardens because also when they were over in Quebec, you had a reading in a garden there too. Yeah. And of course, the theme of today's event is writing the climate and the climate of writing. So it's quite appropriate really that we're competing not only, you know, with the weather, with the wind when we were outside, but also with the little birds. Because that was the short poem that I recited. I was trying to recite it from memory about the life of a little bird. Why would you want anything happier than the life of a little bird? You sing, you fly, and then after that you look for your new home. So. And you meet the cat. And then you meet the cat. So we will have two readings, and then we will have some conversation as well. And during the conversation, if anybody feels like asking a question impromptu or making a comment or contributing to the conversation, then do jump in. You know, a little sign, a little wink, a little raise of the hand, and I'll spot you hopefully. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Felly'n gyntaf, na I gyflwyno Christian. Christian Guay-Poliquin was born just to the north of the US border in Saint-Armand in Quebec. His first novel, Le Fil des Kilomètres, was published both in Quebec and in France, and in English translation as Running on Fumes. His second novel, Le Poids de la Neige, tells the story of a badly injured man, a nationwide power failure, a village buried in snow, and a desperate struggle for survival. And Christian will be reading from that novel, translated as The Weight of Snow, later now. This novel also won several prizes, including the Governor-General's Award for French Language Fiction, the Prix des Collégiens, and the Prix France Québec. It's been translated also into 17 languages, and we're counting. And his third novel, the last in the trilogy, Les Ombres Filantes, will be published soon as Falling Shadows. So we'll have Christian reading after Fflur. Now, Fflur Dafydd needs no introduction to many, but it is always interesting to present your writer, your Welsh writer, on home ground as if you were presenting them internationally. So Fflur Dafydd is an award-winning novelist and screenwriter. She writes in Welsh and she writes in English. She's also a musician, a singer-songwriter. She's the creator and writer of numerous TV series, including Parch, 24 episodes there, the thrillers 35 hours, 35 awr, 35 days, 35 diwrnod. Her feature film, A Llyfrgell, The Library of Suicides, based on her 2009 prize-winning novel of the same name at the Eisteddfod. The feature film was released in 2016, and there is an English version of A Llyfrgell, The Library of Suicides, being published by Hodder and Stoughton soon. And at the moment, Fflur is working on the second series of Amgueddfa Museum, again, a marvellous TV series. And Fflur will be reading from an unpublished short story entitled The Physicians.
The Physicians.
So, I'll let you guess the location of Fflur's short story.
Oh, diolch yn fawr, Ellen. It's lovely to be here. Diolch yn fawr am y croeso. It feels very special to be able to be reading the story, The Physicians, in the very place that it's actually set. And so I think this garden is a place I visited a lot. As a mother with small children running around, getting away from me all around the place. And it wasn't until recently, until I received this commission from the Metropolis Bleu Festival to write something about the environment, gardens and nature, that I actually took the time to go around and look properly at what we have here and at the wonder of what we have here. And you'll feel, I guess, when I'm reading the story, that the natural world takes precedence over us humans. We're very insignificant in the face of things, and it feels like it's almost like these little birds are just acting out some of the things that are happening in the story. Although the birds don't feature, I should actually add them in, I think, after this reading, because they're demanding to be heard. So this is The Physicians. It made sense in a way that it started with a garden and then ended with one. Caenwen heard the announcement on the makeshift radio she'd managed to cobble together out of what was left of her kitchen table, attaching some wiring to it that had suddenly sprung up from the floorboards like weeds, adding the handset of their old landline as a speaker. She'd become quite good at fashioning things into other things. She often wished her partner Petra could be here to see how capable she now was. It seemed an age away when she would have to ask her to assemble all the new furniture and hang all the paintings. Inconceivable now, of course, the buying, the spending, filling her home with random things off the internet. Now you just made do with what you found, scavenging among the rubble that used to be your home. Some of their mum friends, she remembered, would moan daily about the absolute state of their houses, without realising that in the end, a messy lounge was the least of your worries when someone outside was directing a crane and a wrecking ball to it. All of them gone now, of course. Petra, those mothers, those lounges, the sofa delivery guy, the artist who believed splashing a bit of paint on canvas could ensure their immortality. And also gone are those she simply cannot, will not acknowledge as being gone. Those three little ones whose DNA and cells are still embedded deeply inside her, in her blood, in her organs, shed during the precious time they grew in the darkness inside her, when she was able to protect them from all this. She considers herself no more than a chimera now, half woman, half mammal, an arrangement of body parts that miraculously still function, a mere matrix of memories. She was half asleep when she heard the tinny voice coming out of the handset telling people that the National Botanic Gardens were believed to be entirely abandoned and therefore free to use as people wished, either to take shelter, to forage, or simply to rehouse themselves somewhere in the big glass house among the foliage. You needed to be careful about announcements like these. Not all were official channels now, and not all sanctuaries turned out to be true or safe. Last week, she'd walked 5 miles to the Wool Museum to find government officials being battered by a group of desperate teenage girls who then began smashing the display cabinets to get at the traditional cloth blankets, taking the spinning wheels apart to use as weapons. She'd hurried away from the chaos, blood-stained tufts of wool sticking to her feet like some terrible candy floss. Ceinwen had her own reasons for wanting to visit the garden. For one thing, it had been the last place her kids had been on a school trip before everything happened. She wondered if their skin particles might still be hovering in the air somewhere, whether the hurls of their fingerprints might have lingered on the display cabinets, the tiny spirals of their lives imprinted on the glass. And if she did die there, Ceinwen thought that surely it made sense to meet your end in a place where the pulverized human form could simply fall down into the plant roots, her corpse offering itself up as the perfect compost, a new exotic plant species bedding down into her remains. Ceinwen wondered whether the cells of her babies would also then grow into the plant, and if in fact she would still be able to defy her own extinction and theirs by becoming a spiral of DNA on a branch. Whether those new glossy leaves would somehow remember all that had happened to her, to Petra and their boys. As she walks past the deserted welcome desk, she half expects to see staff popping up their heads over the counter, as though the puppet show of normal life could be tugged back into existence at any moment. Walking through the concrete arch onto the pathway leading up to the glass dome, she hears birds chattering for the first time in weeks, a welcoming committee all of their own. For a brief moment, Ceinwen can almost forget that the rest of the world has fallen away behind her. But then the stench of the algal blooms on the lake surface foists herself into her nostrils. She remembers how she used to loiter there, holding Petra's hand while the boys would feed the ducks. But now all that remains of that memory is a solitary dead duck leg sticking up from the water in protest. But just as surely as the ducks are dead, the butterflies have returned, thanks to the peonies and rudbeckia and spurges that were planted long ago by those long gone, and have kept blossoming in spite of themselves, those transplanted from other countries and brought here to resurface, while the ragged robin and the oxeye daisy, the native plants of our own country, have taken root next to them, fusing together in a carnival of colour and nectar. A butterfly appears right next to her, a gatekeeper, nectaring with open wings. Iar fach yr haf, as they call them in her native tongue, a small summer hen. She resists the urge to snatch it, as she has seen some do in desperation and swallow it whole. At the top of the pathway comes into view the glass dome that once seemed like a majestic, all-knowing, all-seeing eye, the largest single-span glasshouse in the world. Something for their small country to boast about. Yet now it looks more like an endpoint, a final destination, a kind of holding centre she's been travelling towards throughout her life. A fug of unpleasant heat hits her as she enters, masking another curious smell, a strange commingling of humans decaying and plants thriving. Kneeling next to the Californian chaparral by the entrance is a half-naked woman in a dirty toga fashioned out of a torn-up dressing gown. It's like being at home, she says in a Californian drawl, before the fires. Ceinwen doesn't respond. At the beginning of all this, she tried so hard to help the strangers who turned to her, listening to their half-mad, nonsensical babble. Her old self is still there in its chimeric mammalian shell, the doctor in her who has been trained to be aware of other people's mental state, their needs. But she's almost immune to it all now. The plants knew how to survive the fire, the woman continues in a daze. Some bulbs would just lie there dormant for years, only growing once the ground was cleared by fire and soaked by rain. It says here that some of the other plants thrived on it, the fire that is. They used it to trigger their seed germination. Some things, some people need disaster, don't they, to live. Ceinwen can see that this woman, like her, is not herself anymore, or even really here. She's around 8,000 miles away in a forest in California, awaiting a fire. She doesn't seem to notice Ceinwen taking small steps away from her and towards a display tunnel at the far end of the dome, a place the boys had visited in the time before. They had burst back into the house, the three of them, tripping over each other to be the first to tell her about the physicians, the famous 12th century native herbalists. Ceinwen had told them to look out for the display because her grandmother swore that she was a direct descendant of the physicians, that it was where her desire to cure people had come from, and she wanted the boys to feel a connection. And yet the boys were slightly confused by this claim because the tour guide had told them that the physicians had descended from a mythical creature, a female herbalist who'd emerged from a lake, married a farmer and brought her family up in a nearby farm. This maiden was said to have warned the farmer that if he dared hit her 3 times, she would return to the lake. And when the farmer inevitably did do this, she'd kept her promise and left her sons to carry on with her work as physicians. Ceinwen's boys were curious that if they were descendants of someone who was not actually real, did that mean they really existed? And was there a chance that she too, their mother, their very own physician, would return to the water one day? She bows her head now to enter the darkened room that is the old apothecary. The display windows that contained the tinctures have all been raided. Quinine and tropane alkaloids all emptied from their bottles. Any tiny fingerprints that may have been there have been smudged by blood. She was always assumed that this old apothecary was pure artifice, dressed like an old-fashioned pharmacy by a designer or marketing officer just to entertain school children. And yet she sees from the leftover pieces of Mexican yam and torn hemlock that someone has gone to the effort of following the physician's recipes properly. Even though no one was meant to touch it, even though it would not matter that it was a pretense, someone somewhere had taken time to make it real. A siren sounds above her head. A siren she's been listening out for since starting out on each one of her journeys these past few weeks. One that confirms that the place is no longer safe, that she only has a few minutes to get out. She's being asked to make a choice now, to choose a direction, to play her part in her own myth. She walks back out into the dome. The Californian lady has made a bed for herself in the chaparral and has her arms outstretched. Looking up, Ceinwen sees that her eyes are transfixed by the large crane and wrecking ball that is being swung like a pendulum in the direction of the glass. Glass, of course, she realises is a commodity now. It can be remade. It is useful, unlike her. Ceinwen lies down next to the woman and waits, clawing at the soil, a smattering of life beneath her fingernails. A dark crescent where she hopes something might regrow after she is gone. We are all just things, she tells herself as the glass shards come for her. Things grown from seeds, and some fare better than others. She thinks of the seeds that are waiting beneath her body now, that have been dormant all this time, just waiting for her to disappear and for the fire and chaos to clear. She envies how a seed knows more than she does about its own fate, and how it has a plan to thrive and grow and multiply and forge its way on through and beyond disaster. And as she imagines those seeds getting ready to emerge, to travel upwards towards the light, she prepares herself to become nothing more now than a place for them to flourish, the myth of their making. Diolch, thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Fflur. It's very sort of haunting somehow to be in the very space with such a powerful piece of writing, such a powerful story, forcing us to think about so many things.
Sorry.
Human decay and plants thriving. But we'll ask Christian to read now as well. Clearly we're not looking at the same climate in terms of temperature, at least, in your book.
Just a complete reverse.
But again, challenging circumstances and a challenging environment for humans to be in.
Well, let's do it. So I will read the introduction of my book. I have 2 prologue and then it starts. So it starts before it starts.
Okay.
So I'll go. Today, time turned the snow to metal, and the silence rejoiced. To form a perfect union, the white strokes rush groundwards. Mountains grab onto the bark of trees and on spiny arms. The greens disappear, the blues become opalescent, the edges of the brown and the russets fade. At times, a bird will draw a black line across this accelerated space. The labyrinth. Look. This place is vaster than any human life. Anyone who will try to flee will be forced to retrace his steps. Anyone who thinks he's moving in a straight line is describing great concentric circles. Here, everything slips away from your hands and your eyes. Here, forgetfulness of the world outside is stronger than any memory. Look again. This labyrinth offers no way out. Wherever your eyes fall, it's there. Look closer. No monster, no famished beast crushes in its corridors. But we are caught in the trap. Either we wait until the days and night defeats us, or we fashion ourselves wings and escape. 38. This is the land of snow, and it does not share its domain. It dominates the landscape. It waits upon the mountains. The tree bow. They reach the earth, and their backs bend. Only the great spruce refuse to give in. They take their punishment straight and black. They trace the end of the village and the beginning of the forest. By my window, the birds come and go, crowl, and scratch for food. From time to time, one of them will observe the quiet house with a worried eye. On the frame outside, a thin branch stripped bare has been attached horizontally as a kind of barometer. If it points upward, the weather will be clear and dry. If it points down, there will be snow. Right now, the weather is uncertain. The branch is in the mid-journey of its trajectory. It must be late. The gray sky is opaque and without nuance. The sun could be everywhere. A few snowflakes dance in the air and hang on into every second. 100 steps from the house in the clearing, Matthias is pushing a long stick into the snow. It looked like the mast of a ship, but without any sails or flags. Drops of water shiver on the roofline and slip down to the tips of the icicles. When the sun comes out, they sparkle like sharpened blades. From time to time, one of them will pull away, fall, and stab the snow. A dagger thrusts into immensity. But the snow is invincible. Soon, it will reach the bottom of my window, then the top, then I'll be blind. This is winter. The days are short and frigid. The snow shows its teeth. The great expanses of space shrinks. 39. The window frame is damp. The wood stain is spongy, tinted circles. When it gets very cold, they are covered with crystals of frost, a little like lichen. Logs crackle in the wood stove. From my bed, I can see the glittering coals through the air vent. The stove is ancient, a massive piece. Its creak into when they open. Its heap of black, burning cast iron in the center of our lives. I'm alone on the porch. Everything is motionless. Everything is in place. The stool by the entrance, the rocking chair, the kitchen utensils, everything. A strange golden circle sits on the table. It was not there this morning. Matthias must have gone to the other side, but I did notice everything and nothing. Pain leaves me no respite. It holds me, it grips me, it possesses me. To tolerate it, I close my eyes and imagine I'm at the wheel of my car. If I concentrate, I can hear the motor rowing and see the landscapes goes by, dazzled by the vanishing point of the road. But when I open my eyes, reality crushes me. I am bound to this bed, my legs imprisoned by two heavy splints. My car, a heap of twisted metal somewhere beneath the snow. I am no longer the master of my fate. My stomach breaks the silence. I am hungry. I feel weak and stiff. On the beside table, some crumbs of black bread and the remains of an oily coffee. Matthias will be back any time now. 41. The doors opens and a gust of cold air blows into the room. Matthias comes and drops an armful of wood next to the stove. The logs crash to the floor and shocks of bark goes flying. Matthias pulls off his coat, kneels down and stirs the fire with a poker. Behind him, the snow from his boots begins melting and seeks its level on the uneven floor. It's not very cold, he tells me, holding his hand towards the source of heat. But it's damp. It chills you to the bone. When the flames begin to drool and lick the iron frame, Matthias closes the stove door, puts the soup pot on to warm, and turns into my direction. His bushy eyebrows and white hairs and the deep wrinkles crisscrossing his front head make him look like a mad scientist. Maybe yours. I have something for you, he says. I give him a questioning look. Matthias picks up the gold cylinder from the table and hands it to me. He gives me a big smile. The cylinder is heavy and telescopic. Its ends are covered in glass. I examine it for all angles. Oh, it's a spyglass, like the ones sailors used long ago to pick out the thin line of the coast or the enemy's ship. Look outside, he says. I sit up in the bed as I can, extend the sliding tube, and place it against my eye. Everything moves towards me, and each object takes on precise dimension. As if I were on the other side of the window, I see the black flight of the birds, the footsteps in the snow, the unreal calm of the village, the edge, of course, of the forest. Keep looking. I know this landscape by heart. I have been watching it from some time now. I do not remember the summer because of the fever and the drugs, but I did see the slow movement of the landscape, the gray autumn sky, the reddening light of the trees. I saw the ferns devoured by frost, the tall grass breaking when a breeze rose up, the first flakes landing upon the frozen ground. I saw the tracks of animals that inspected the area after the first snow. The sky now has swallowed everything up ever since. The landscape is in waiting. Everything has been put off until spring. Nature with no respite. The mountains cut off the horizon. The forest hems us on all sides, and the snow blinds us. Look harder, Matthias tells me. I examine the long stick that he set up in the clearings. He had added a minute graduation marks on it. It's for measuring the snow, he announces, triumphant. With the spyglass, I can see now. I can see the snow has reached 41 centimeters. I consider the whiteness of the landscape a moment, then slump back on my bed and close my eyes. Great, I tell myself. Now we can put numbers on our distress. And now we make just a huge jump in the novels, and we go towards the end where my main character now can walk again, so goes in the village, but a snowstorm came and then make his journey more difficult. 253. I close my eyes for a moment. When I will reach the house, I will get undressed and bundle up in a big wool blanket. A fire will be burning in the fireplace. Matthias will put the soup on. Maybe there will be black bread. I will eat everything he sets down in front of me, then I'll fall asleep, watched over by the light and the heat of the flames. But when I open my eyes, I'm still lying on the ground, and it's snowing like crazy. I roll over, I struggle, I try to get up, but I only sink deeper. The cold is holding me down. Every moment waits upon, and I have no more strength. My leg has stopped sending me pain signals. I don't feel them anymore. I should have taken shelter with Jonas at the stable. I would have been comfortable in the straw. I would have been warm. Ice is forming knots on my coats and hats and gloves. I must not stop. I must get up. I'm almost there. I steer into action, dropping myself on my elbows. I crawl, I twist, I drag myself along the snow. I make a little progress. True, I feel like I am really sinking, pulled down by icy underground currents. I move more and more slowly. My hands are completely numb. Maybe I should do that like the old Matthias and pray. The blizzard holds. It is impatient, eager to cover me up, embrace me, and close over me. It salivates a little before it devours me. I curl up to keep warm. I'm like everybody else. I cannot accept the possibility of my death. I'm too afraid. I try to stay calm. But my breathing is out of control. I can't stay there. I have to keep moving. The snow is a bed of cutting crystal. I have to stand up. I refuse to go this way. Bend into myself, face to the ground. So I gather my courage and roll into my back, my arms outstretched, palms open to the sky. All around me, shadows prowl. The night is hungry, and the snow carnivorous. Thank you.
So thanks to Fflur and Chris for very powerful readings and for bringing a little of that struggle between humanity and the environment, or the climate, or the weather, and how people interact with each other in those circumstances. And I just wanted to start by asking both of you really about the background to this, why these two pieces came about, what made you write them, what were you thinking of, and also if anybody else has a question that they would like to ask Fflur or Chris after we have their immediate reaction to that, then please, raise your hand or whatever. Shall we start with Chris this time?
I can. Well, as I was reading, extract from The Weight of Snow, who's my second novel, it's funny how, finally, when we write a novel, a lot of things happens that we don't especially manage to put them there, but they are there. So at the beginning, I just wanted to tell something I didn't know yet about, like an intergenerational friendship, which was like simple as that, between a young man and an old man that don't know each other and, start to, have a, relationship together, a friendly relationship together or something like that. So then I said, well, there's like, I had to to put some problem in it, to put some tension, and then slowly came two ideas who allowed me to take hostages my two main characters. First was because I had 3 novels now, and they are like slightly linked. It's subtle, but it's not a saga or trilogy or whatever, but they are, there's something. It's the same power outage in my 3 novels, and it was not planned at the beginning, but well, there it started because I had this power touch in my first novel, and I say, oh, if I take back this idea of the big electricity shutdown, add with like a winter time, then I can put my 2 characters, in a house, just like 2 fish in a bowl, and look at them, do they will fight or they will help each other, like something like that. So at the beginning, it was just to talk about, to put a scene between 2 men that everything opposite, the age, the culture, the way they are and they act. My young man is injured, mute at the beginning of the novel, and and grumpy all the time. And the old one is in shape, he's clever, he's a reader, he's talkative. So they are completely opposite, and he's more into concept than into manual stuff. And my protagonist, the mute guy, he's a mechanic, let's say, but they're really like opposite, and then they are forced to, to spend the winter together in a hard condition. And I did not want my novel to be all about like, physical surviving and, so they will kill them, we will kill them, or they will kill us, and blah, 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 and go and that. So I just wanted, okay, they have to struggle to make their, find their food and, wood to keep it. The main struggle is between them.
Yeah.
So the fighting against, elements, the weather, snow, is fighting against or, more dealing with.
Yeah.
And to deal with all this, they have to be together. So this in their, up and down relationship, like every kind of relationship, like in love and friendship, but they have to bond, to build some bridges, so they can be, together, to face what they have to face, But more than everything, they have to face the other.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So in that sense, the climate and the condition and the wilderness is almost sort of symbolic in that sense, rather than sort of physical, contextual, practical.
No, I think it's just like so there.
Yeah.
It's so there that it's just the part of it. It's it's not symbolic or allegoric. It's there, and they have to deal with it. So they are not thinking, so we are in the wilderness, so what we do now? I mean, so they are. We here, and here it's what's happening. I mean, it's those forests, and they kind of to normalize. Also, as a North American, but this concept of wilderness, it's more European concept, I'll say, because in North America, like huge forests, especially like in Canada and Quebec, where sometimes you're in the road and you look up north and then you see it just like it give a little vertigo to see, okay, this forest keep on like for 5,000 kilometers, like there is nothing there. Maybe like a hydroelectricity, dam somewhere up north, but it's almost it. So the wilderness thing, it's really the practical thing. It's the physical dimension of it, and I try not to exoticize it. So the wilderness it's the environment, and the environment all around is resources. So all the main characters, in the little village, in their house, my main characters as well, just have to find a way to manage with it, to find a way, to get the wood, to get water, to get food, and they succeed in a way. It's not, after a while, it's not the big deal. It's just the constant struggle who made this wilderness really real, really like something. It's just the baseline, and it's a real baseline.
And it's where they are.
It's where they
Almost normal.
Yeah, and the thing, it's not about, again, but it's not about nature. It's always about the relation we have with that, what we call nature, which is an abstract thing, if not.
So Fflur, if I can turn to you then and to ask you about sort of what made you think of writing this particular piece, and what was the inspiration, or what was behind writing it?
Well, it's interesting with my piece, but that it was an actual commission for the Metropolis Bleu Festival. And so I had this sort of brief that it needed to be about, the environment, sustainability, about nature. And sometimes it's really interesting for writers to get that kind of brief, because they sometimes respond to it in a way that is not their normal writing process, if you see what I mean. So maybe different to your concept, your starting point with that kind of wanting to have that relationship. I came to it, I think, from the notion of kind of that natural world, doing the research into the plants that were here and their relationship with one another, and then thinking about bringing a character into that scenario, which is totally different to what I usually do, which is sort of refreshing actually to think of it in those terms. And what I think I was thinking was, because so much of my work looks at relationships between people, cultural contexts, literary context, history, all those things, actually trying to put them in the context of the natural world was quite an interesting challenge then, thinking about, there's something that felt distinctly sort of un-Welsh about this story, which I also kind of relished in writing it. And so for me, that main character, I wanted to explore what it would be like for that main character then to become, I say it in the story, to realise she's a mammal trying to survive. So she's had everything stripped away from her. She's not in her domestic role as a mother, as a partner. She's not in her anymore as a role in a doctor in society. She has all those constructs that she usually knows how to function, how to fit in with. All those are taken away from her. And then I saw that in having those things stripped away, that you would see your own similarity to things in the natural world more clearly. You would see that you were part of the fabric of this creation. And so those are the things that I wanted to explore. And I think that, until people are thrown into that kind of situation of chaos and destruction, nobody knows how they're going to react. So I wanted to show a character, even though she's grieving and she's lost everything that she had in her life, she's not giving up. She's actually trying to find ways to survive. She's, assembling her own radio. She's going along to these different places where there might be salvation, there might be hope for her to continue her life even further. She's seeing herself as having to ride out that existence, maybe in the way a plant would. It would have to reach the end of its natural life. It wouldn't be an option for her just to end her life. And when I started reading, walking around this particular dome, which is just amazing now to me, you will know that I'm obsessed with national institutions anyway, National Library, National Museum. And so I was like, National Botanic Gardens is the next, feels like the next natural step for me. You can't offend these plants, I'm hoping not anyway, so maybe there's more scope here for me to really, bring them to the light, show what's going on. The idea of this place being full of plants from different places across the world, it being this sort of multicultural gathering that's so harmonious and peaceful, these little birds around us. I felt that was something that you could, again, to explore identity in a sort of a very unusual kind of fashion, and towards the end that she is becoming part of the soil, she's clawing at the soil, wanting to be part of it, and feeling that her own, like a piece of biology, that she's thinking about her biological function, that she's been a mother, that DNA of her as a creature is still inside her, fusing with the plants. All those things were just seeming to be like very rich territory for bringing a very, very different kind of character to the fore, one that I'd never kind of written before. So I'm kind of excited by Cainwen as a character, and maybe want to do something else with her in future.
Because clearly there's very strong backstory to the short story here as well, and she seems very, very human in so many ways, and yet during the course of the short stories she becomes as far as I can understand
Yeah.
anyway, towards the end she becomes part of that soil.
Yeah, yeah.
And she becomes dehumanized in
Yeah.
that sense, doesn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that you really wanted to explore in, you know, the fragility of human life and what happens to us and
Yeah,
the lack of spirituality possibly?
Yeah, I think so. I think all those, again, all those usual structures are taken away from us who make us, you know, what we are, and thinking about, you know, the culture maybe is kind of redundant at that point, if you reach that point of sort of, you know, nuclear disaster or destruction, or something has gone terribly wrong when all you have is your own body and feeling how that is a part of creation. And some of the projects I've worked on recently have been really interesting in refocusing me as a writer on that notion of the human condition being this sort of small part of a much greater thing. So a couple of years ago I did a project with the Eisteddfod, which will culminate in a musical that's going to be put on stage in August, about astronomy and Welsh links to astronomy and this woman's mission to the moon. I've become sort of moon obsessed, if you like, and seeing I wrote a book, Fflur Dafydd, so moon songs or moonwa, that looks at the different phases of my life in relation to the moon cycles, and realised when I was looking back there were lots of sort of links to astronomy in Welsh literature, in myth, in some of the hymns that we sang at school. Like, you know, we were always actually trying to frame our own existence in terms of a much wider, much more complex sort of system beyond us. And I think that that's followed through quite nicely to looking more at the natural world and how we fit in the human condition. You know, and the backstory. What's interesting about the story, we're talking about it in the event this morning because I didn't want the story to be too long. I cut Ceinwen's backstory, so there were 3 paragraphs that explain to you what actually happened to her family. And actually, in cutting them, I thought the story became more powerful, more poignant in some ways, because it was up to the reader to actually work out maybe what had happened. You'd have your own version of what that disaster may have been. And it's interesting with the power of the short story. This, again, getting a brief like this, it could only be 2,000 words, which at the beginning just felt like, oh, how am I ever going to create this sort of entire universe, this world for Ceinwen, this backstory? But actually having something like that, a cut-off point, 2,000 words, having to focus every single paragraph being meaningful in some way, working out who the cast of plants were going to be. That took me a long time. Like, okay, Spurges, Rebecca, you make it. Some other flowers didn't make the cut. I'm really sorry to anybody here who feels offended by that. But, you know, the Californian chaparral is just round the corner there. I was saying I should go and just lie in it, just for the symbolic moment. But it's interacting with it feels kind of exciting to me to be writing about the natural world in that sense, but also very specific plants. When I've been writing so long about libraries, dark spaces, museums with their artefacts and behind their glass cases, it feels like there's so much more scope to this now as a new creative journey, really.
Well, I know that we've got a question from Jenny here, so I'll invite Jenny to ask a question or to make her comment.
One of the things that it made me think about was a certain conduct surfacing in which you have an individual sort of almost on the verge of returning to the earth, and losing and becoming part of as freestanding, I think it says, towards the end. But actually her way out of it, she becomes pregnant. And then I was also thinking about the difference about how your nature here is always inflected by community and history, whereas the difference in yours is very much it's a bleak space. It's not a man-made space, which in a way this is. It's a man-made space. And it becomes not, I think, it's right, it's not symbolic, it's just the state of being. Maybe that's European versus North America. That the experience of nature is always for us filtered through history. Whereas I think afterwards is very interesting because she's unearthing previous histories which are now lost and water. But I mean, what do you think about that? I suppose that was over really, but
But what I'll say, yeah, no, but it is. I'm thinking that there's, it's those state of culture that are really within us that we just think them true when they are confronted to another, another way of thinking or other habits. So, but historically, I feel like it's funny what I'm gonna say, but there's this movie I think it went out like 15 years ago, Into the Wild. It's the story of a man who goes to live in Alaska and in North America. This was a movie among the others, and another like wilderness movie and blah blah. But I remember in France, though, my friends in France, it went boom, and that's it. So I said, but why? So I watched this movie, and I said, well, I don't think the reason is into the movie. It's an okay movie, and the guy, it's a real story, and the guy died at the end. He wanted to go too far for too long, and then got stuck, and well, it's a sad story. But for the for my friends, I'll talk about my friends in France. Let's just talk about so instead of all European person, but just them, they were all amazed about those landscape, but like deeply, and we're just like, well, this is just it. How so? You can amaze when you go across it, when you do something, through it, or not just because it's there, but it's beautiful, it's there, but this kind of like passion for the concept of infinite, kind of.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we were, from my point of view, we were kind of laughing and saying, "Oh, this is amazing for you." It's because it's so usual for us. So this is the thing, but where it comes, maybe something not relevant, but where it comes in the human use, it's how we live with it. So those this wilderness, it's, for example, like hunting culture are really different in Europe than in North America, and there's this thing, like for hunters here in Europe, they hunt in a little boisé, I don't know in French, it's just in English, with a little forest, between fields.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little, because this is what forest is. But in North America, it's like you hunting like in a part of the huge woods, so it just gives different scales of the reality, and I think it changes. Then after that, changes like way to look at things, way to create fictions, but I think it's more subtle than we think. The big change, the big difference. We all see it and talk about it, but when it's come to application through fiction, through cultural habits, then I think subtle things. Yeah. I don't know if I was clear, but.
Yeah, no. That you have a different perception of.
But it's really within us. It's really culturally integrated. So it's not something familiar. So just something for us to go to do path really far, and not to walk path to made them really. It's something kind of usual for someone living near the forest. I always wonder how's the view near this big tree 2 kilometers that way, we'll do a path. So it's not the relation with nature. It's not just like to look around. It's to interact with it very much.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Jenny, because I think, when looking at the story now, thinking about what you said about the construct, because even though I am looking at the natural world, I'm still looking at it within that kind of the confines of it being sort of within this sort of institution where we're actually focusing on it in a sort of a cultural sort of preservation kind of way. I couldn't even get away from the physician's reference, which is, these native herbalists. So I was actually also thinking about something that's quite deeply rooted in Welsh culture and history. And maybe the way that I'm writing about nature is different to, there is a lot about writing about landscape in Wales, and a huge tradition of writing about, the countryside and farming and agriculture. And those things are kind of, I guess, not part of my sort of really my references, but I guess I'm interested in the natural world in it with a different identity, that it is sort of culture led, actually, that you're quite right, that it is, that without that maybe the interest wouldn't be there, in quite the same way. So it's still following on from a kind of my own sort of tradition or obsession of having to see it within a construct, Yeah.
But just thinking about that relationship between culture or people's presence in the landscape, and thinking almost, I don't know, I mean, others will be able to correct me, but there's almost, if you're writing about the Welsh landscape, or if you're locating your work, your fiction in the Welsh landscape, or your sort of creative non-fiction, and if you don't carry an awareness of the relationship between people, culture, language and that landscape, it's almost as if you're engaging in cultural appropriation. It's almost that, that if you don't know the name of the mountain, the field, the stream, and that you call it Big Stream or Elephant Lake or whatever it is, then that we expect a sense of engagement not only with the physicality of the environment and the landscape, but with that human connection as manifested through language or through myth, but again usually through language and so on. So I don't know, the way that you're talking, you don't name your places in your work, do you, necessarily?
I don't, but for the same reason, because I don't name it to be like, I prefer to be like generic,
Yeah.
It's forest is winter, but I love when, fiction do name stuff, and I have an anecdote, I mean, like we're here, like, and I heard that here in Wales, and the Welsh culture like sings a lot. And when I was working, I spent the summer in Corse, South France, the Mediterranean, and like the Corse song, are really popular as well, and blah blah blah. So when we hear, I remember I'm at that bar, and like, it's an anecdote. I mean, but we had that bar, and then a few like older men are there, and can you do it? Can you do it on up tonight? And then said, hey, do it, sing that song, please, for us up tonight. And his friends were like, tickling him. So, and then this guy started to sing like that, and the song, and I cannot like understood everything, but of course, it's near French and Italian, so we can. But the thing is, it's an ultra traditional song. Who just names places? It will name places. I was there with my donkey, and we were in that town, and then we passed that creek, and then we go through this mountain, and and I found like something, and then I had like kind of like a enlightenment. But I'm just kidding. But it's like I said, it's the same thing from like it's the same thing as the lumber songs of Quebec. Like lumberjack who were going up north. Winter. We have like an heritage, a lot of songs like that. Who are quite beautiful though. Yeah. But they're beautiful. But they just name. Yeah. So. Yeah. We were going up that river, then across that lake, then across that mountain, and I said, oh, it's so different, but it's so the same. So I love both, but for me, I think maybe it's the journey who made like the human relation with and the fact of naming, then the name itself or themselves,
Yeah.
Who has a strong feeling. But both, I love both. But me, I try to not name anything.
Yeah.
It's simpler. It's a trick as well.
And that's the first time that I've done that in the English language version of the library, Suicide. So it's set in an unnamed country which has a difficult relationship with the neighbouring country. You can read significance into that, but there was something quite liberating about taking all the Welsh references out. Not that it's not a Welsh book. I mean, it's still channeled through a very, it's kind of a strong Welsh identity, I think. But you want to kind of open that up also to other cultures, so that they can apply their own kind of, tensions that they feel culturally with other countries. And it just changes the feel of that novel. It makes it gives it something else. And playing around with names, we talked about this morning, like spelling Prydferch with a TH so that it's not, mispronounced by people, or Udig with a double U that makes it look like it's Norwegian, like people reading were like, what culture is this? I kind of like the idea of that fusion, that also, while being very deeply rooted in your own culture, you can somehow feel a little bit alien and strange to other people, which is also appealing, I think.
Oh, Nia, sorry. Yeah. Oh, Anjali, but...
Sorry, just saying a little about Into the Wild, because I read criticisms about how that guy just goes out. I mean, it's true stories, but it happens. There's no connection, no culture. Doesn't talk to anyone about how you might live in the wilderness. Obviously, there are people that live there that know quite how to survive, and some ignorance.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're talking about is the opposite. It's this wilderness with a lot of culture and a lot of relationships, people together in talking and negotiating, rather than this lone here and going out. But both of your texts had interesting confrontations of death, by looking at life, also understand the death in a way, which is that complete impact into the world.
But I think it's different at the same time. I mean by that into the wild, in this little story, it's really like the seek of the absolute wilderness. It's someone alone who wants to go far as he can, and then stay there longer as he can to be the further as he can from society. This is one thing, but it's already, a North American, there's kind of this reaction to be against society, and it becomes, this story, and whatever that it was true at the beginning, just fiction, this kind of scenario will call them a Robinsonade, Robinson Crusoe. What's his name in English?
Robinson Crusoe.
Crusoe, yeah. So there's something about being alone in the wilderness, and there's something of the I think of the seeking of absolute. So with my novels, it's not like that. It's just the absolute is there, and we have to manage it. There's no seek there. Just the seek is not the same, but yeah.
And there's other people in that world, not just
exactly. Yeah, it's why they survive.
Going in the Green Knight, which is a quest narrative into natural world, which ends up in an alternate space. And that's 14th century English. That's really interesting, with this sense of this. It's closer to science fiction.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. No. But this wonderful German painter Caspar David Friedrich that we probably know. Do you guys know Caspar David Friedrich?
I don't know him. Caspar
I mean, he's huge romantic German painter.
Okay.
And he did many painting of the Europe of the 18th century, I think. Maybe 19, yeah, of the Europe wilderness. And there's a wonderful one that it's the hunter in the forest, and then you have this huge painting with big trees, and then a small character walking.
Yeah.
going to, and it's all like that, like someone looking at the horizon on top of the mountain. It's really romantic, but in this keep of the absolute of, into the wild. I think there's some link there. There's a romanticism as well in this kind of seek of the wilderness and what's in there, kind of the infinite, the power that like.
Yeah, it's sort of, I talked a little bit this morning about when I did my residency on Bardsey Island, even though it's not quite, the disastrous situation of the character in my story, but having to live on an island, a small island only a mile across, having put in that situation, placed in a lighthouse cottage with 2 ecologists, like those 6 weeks of just having to make do with that situation that you're faced with, that kind of idea of adaptability. And how adaptable we are as humans to those surroundings. But it's interesting, it's always a contrast with people that you never know who you're going to meet. Like the woman who, by the Californian chaparral in my story, was kind of like a version of that. Like you're going to meet someone like might have nothing in common in that situation. Right at the end, you're going to have to make do with that situation. And the interesting thing about human interaction, and that she's lost all her capacity to sort of care about others in a way that. Linking back to your notion of gender, because she's a mother and she's thinking about her own capacity to reproduce, and that she has done that, and in a way she relates to those plants in a strange way, that she's part of their reproduction process in a way, and I don't know where I'm going with this, but there are kind of those kind of references there that link a lot to like experiences that we as women have in different kind of periods of our life, I guess. That time when I went to Bardsey Island when I was not a mother, where I was just free to be who I needed to be and adapt myself around that situation. And then this character in the story now having gone into this kind of situation, but after she's had that family life, those interactions, her bodily functions of reproduction, it changes the dynamic of how she's then reacting to those very bare surroundings. So yeah, no, interesting points, I think.
I think we could talk for a long time about the various themes that your readings have inspired and the discussion that we've had so far. But I think we probably need to bring things to a close. I'd like to thank both of you. Diolch yn fawr iawn i'r ddau ohonoch chi. Da ni wedi cael pnawn bendigedig. It's lovely to be in this wonderful location as well. Yeah. Thanks to Alexandra as well for organising everything, the funders. Geff, diolch yn fawr am ffilmio i ni. And Egin has been wonderful host as well earlier this morning. So diolch yn fawr iawn, and thanks to everybody for coming. Bye.
Thank you.